Like a light, lighting up in the dark. You make it right, I forgot how to act. It's so classic. Every time you make me nervous and I lose my words. It's been a while since I forgot the most simple words. I feel calm when you're around, like nothing can break me. Now I know why it never worked out before. High low, it would always turn out bad, so bad. But every time we start a fight, we always stop in time. We both know how to be gentle, never cross the line. I feel calm when you're around, like nothing can break me. Sometimes, but I know we're safe. Two peas in a pod, a roller coaster to walk out the door. We could be in control, but we just keep on.
Welcome to Better Than Ever Live, coming to you live from Champion Studio in Charleston, South Carolina. Wherever you're watching, wherever you're listening, I hope you're making today, and as John Wooden said, make every day your masterpiece. My name's Dr. David Geier, orthopedic surgeon, sports medicine specialist, and media medical expert. I help you feel and perform your best regardless of age, injuries, or any medical condition you have. I just want to help you feel better and perform better, and that's what I do in my practice. That's what I do, hopefully, on this show. As I always say, though, what we're about to talk about on all of these Better Than Ever Lives is not specific medical advice. This is sort of the legal disclaimer I always give. I am not your doctor. You're not my patient. So everything we talk about is for information and educational purposes only. I would love to hear from you, whether you're watching on YouTube, watching live on Facebook, or watching live on LinkedIn. I'd love to know where you are, who you are, so put your first name, where you are, and I'd love your comments on anything we're going to talk about today. We have a lot of good stuff to get to, but it shouldn't take too long, so maybe I'll have time to answer a few questions as well. And remember, if you can't watch live, there is a podcast version that you can subscribe to wherever you get your podcast, Better Than Ever Live, so you can listen to it wherever you want to be. All right, a lot to get to today, some really good stuff, but we're going to start out with nutrition. I feel that we have seen a shift in the last, maybe 3 to 5 years, where we've gone from the traditional food pyramid where, hey, you should eat lots of healthy carbs and cut out the fats, cut out the saturated fats, to this gradual evolution to more of a ketogenic approach, low carbs, higher fats, maybe more moderate proteins to lose weight and all sorts of health benefits. Well, I suspect that the people that produce carbohydrate rich foods aren't so happy about that. The reason I say that is I am reading from a press release from the Grain Foods Foundation. So they represent basically companies, maybe wheat farmers, I don't know, but people that have a vested interest in promoting breads and cereals and things like that. Anyway, the press release is about a study, and I looked up the study because I wanted to see if the authors of the study were financially tied to the grain industry in some way, but they had no financial disclosures. And that's important anytime you look at medical studies, to make sure that if it's a study about a particular surgical implant, maybe a screw or an anchor that's used in shoulder surgery, you want to make sure that they're not funded by Arthrex or DePuy or Mytech or the companies that make those types of things. And with nutrition, you want to make sure they're not employed by the Beef Council or have some other financial tie. It's not to say that it couldn't be a good study, but you just have to take it a little bit with a grain of salt when you see that. These authors of this study did not have a financial tie. But basically, the reason the Grain Food Foundation is promoting this study, there was a study published in Frontiers in Nutrition that looked at taking refined grain foods, enriched refined grain foods, breads, cereals, that type of thing, and said that if you take those foods away from people, that they're going to lack certain nutrients, specifically dietary fiber, iron, and magnesium. What they did, they took a group of people that were 19 to 50, a group that was 51 to 99, and then basically removed their refined grains and found, lo and behold, that yes, those types of things, they were 10%, I don't remember the specific numbers, 10% less than they were before in each of those things, dietary fiber, iron, and magnesium. Now, the key with this study was that these were people that were already lacking these nutrients and other nutrients. They basically were already eating a poor diet. And so if you then took away their breads and cereals, that they would lack even more of those nutrients. What they're getting at is what I sort of referred to earlier, that people who don't eat really healthy, maybe they're overweight, are by and large switching to a ketogenic diet. My dad, over the last year or so, has switched to a ketogenic diet. And so he doesn't eat breads, he doesn't eat cereals. And I suspect that this is what they're going after. People that aren't terribly healthy but are going to keto to lose weight. And they're saying, well, hold on, if you give up grains, breads, cereals, that kind of thing, you're going to lack even more of these nutrients. And that might be true. But what that leaves out is there are other ways to get dietary fiber. Vegetables are a perfect example. You can get iron in a number of different foods. Magnesium's a little trickier in the American diet, but you can supplement magnesium. And a lot of people would be would benefit from that. We can talk about all the benefits of magnesium and how to get it in a future show, but I'm not anti-grain. If it works for you, if breads work for you, if especially whole grain breads, maybe whole wheat, but certainly whole grain breads, maybe cereals, I'm not necessarily opposed to them. I don't eat them. I don't eat cereals. I don't eat breads, but I'm not saying that everybody should. Now, there is a really interesting series of books by Dr. David Perlmutter about grain and some of the issues with that. You can check those out if you want. I'm not necessarily opposed to it. Try and see if it works for you. I would argue, though, whatever diet you can get, you can do a plant-based diet without grains and get most of these benefits. Even keto, there's ways to get most of those nutrients. So, for what that's worth. All right, complete pivot here. We're going to talk about kids, not nutrition. We've talked a lot about kids' nutrition lately. We're going to talk about kids and exercise and activity. Now, there's a new study published in the journal Pediatrics. It was by researchers at the University of Washington and Washington State, and they compiled all of these studies, hundreds of studies together, looking at nature around kids' homes and its effect on their physical activity and its effect on their mental health. And what they found out, and to be fair, we've always been, and especially the American Academy of Pediatrics, but all doctors largely have been saying, hey, we need to get kids outside and play. Get them off the video games, get them off TV, get them off social media after school, get them outside and be physically active. Now, sometimes that can be indoors if they're playing basketball on a team or something like that, but by and large, get outside and play. But it's been the play that's been the focus, not the get outside. And what this study, what these researchers found is that basically the more kids are out in nature, the better their physical activity tends to be and the better their mental health. And what's interesting is these effects were especially prominent from kids in disadvantaged communities, basically poverty, things like that. Now, I'm not going to get into all the social aspects of it, but it is hard, especially if you live in big urban areas. These urban playgrounds with the basketball courts aren't the same as a park with trees and fields. It's just not the same. And so if there's any way to get people out in nature, that's a good thing. I'm a big fan of physical activity however you can get it, but I am loving the idea of getting kids outside. In addition to the physical activity, it's the fresh air, it's the vitamin D from the sunlight. Big fan. Woods, parks, things like that. Obviously do it in a way that they're safe with other kids, but I completely agree that this is potentially a good thing. All right, how many of you run marathons? I am not one of those. My dad ran a marathon once. I have never even had a desire to run a marathon. Back when I used to run, and I ran for a number of years, I gave it up, I don't know, a while ago. It just wasn't necessarily my thing. But I got up to where I was running about 13-mile runs once a week. So, I could have probably pushed the envelope in my training and gotten up to the level to run a marathon. It was just never something I really felt like I wanted to do. And that's a lot of time. But I know a ton of people and a ton of my patients run marathons. I think it's great. Does it matter, training for a marathon? Does it matter if you're a man or a woman in terms of how you train, and more importantly, the benefits you get from a health standpoint from training versus men versus women? So there's an interesting study that just came out that looked at that specific thing, especially heart function from marathon training, men versus women. So they had basically marathoners, people that had run 5 to 7 marathons over the last 3 years, male and female, and then compared them to just recreationally active adults, people that play tennis or pickleball, things like that, and looked at left ventricle function. That's the part of your heart that pushes the blood out to the rest of your body. Looked at aortic stiffness. That's the aorta is what comes off the heart to deliver blood to the rest of the body. And what they were looking at is the stiffness of the arterial walls, or how elastic those were. And then something called ventricular vascular coupling, which is basically a marker of cardiac performance. Here's what they found, and this is really interesting. Women, and this is compared to male marathon runners, or male or female, just active people but not marathon runners. Women who completed multiple marathons didn't have the reduction in left ventricle function and didn't have the same stiffness of the aorta as the male marathoners, or just the physically active people who weren't runners. Basically, they appeared to have better heart function. They had better ventricular vascular coupling, again, another indicator of cardiac performance, and their hearts were mechanically more efficient after going through a training cycle for a marathon. Basically, they responded, and the women's hearts responded to marathon training better than men. Now, the question is why? And the study wasn't really set up to figure out why, but they thought, and I agree, it has something to do most likely with the estrogen levels that women have, obviously much higher than men. Estrogen, this has been shown in other studies, estrogen increases cardiac hypertrophy. Basically, your brain gets bigger in response to physical training. Estrogen lowers blood pressure. Estrogen decreases the stiffness of the arteries, all of which improve your heart health and heart function. So if you're physically active as a woman, you might consider training for a marathon. It could be very good for your heart. All right, we're going to talk about this. This falls into the tell me something I already know category, but there is a new study, actually a few new studies, looking at music in your workouts. And a new study, University of Edinburgh in Scotland, found that what they wanted to look at is the effect of music on your running performance when you're tired. And to be fair, that's what we all deal with, whether it's running or going to the gym or whatever, especially if you work out at the end of the day after work, you're just dragging and you don't really want to go to the gym. Well, maybe listening to music can help you. So what they found is that listening to a self-selected playlist, I mean, who else is selecting your playlist? I guess if you listen to one of these, like Pandora used to be, where you couldn't really pick the songs, maybe something like that. But listening to a self-selected playlist can boost the quality of your exercise and give you basically more benefits from the exercise. A study out of the University of Verona in Italy specifically found that high-tempo music made exercise seem like less effort. Another study, high-tempo music can increase your stamina. That's interesting, and put you in a better mood. So here's the deal. Yes, music seems to be good for your workouts, but pick songs that you like. Of course, that goes without saying. Choose motivational songs. I actually have a playlist called Inspiration. I typically only listen to it at the gym on weekends. I don't really know why, but I do have that. And then find songs with a high tempo beat that you can get into sync with. Now, I'm curious what you listen to. I'm not gonna lie, occasionally I do listen to podcasts. This morning, early morning at the gym, I listened to a podcast on peptides for a variety of orthopedic conditions, arthritis, tendonitis, things like that. Things like BPC 157, TB4, CJC 1295, ipamorelin, AOD, all sorts of really interesting new treatments. I'm a big fan of peptides for a variety of musculoskeletal conditions, so that's what I listen to at the gym. But I've told you about my powerlifting gym before, and they blast heavy metal music, so it's all I can do to hear my podcast. So very often I listen to music, and I personally like to listen to a playlist rap hip hop. So I'll listen to, and it's kind of old school. I mean, there is some Kendrick Lamar and things like that on there, but it's more Beastie Boys, Dr. Dre, Snoop Dogg, old school Eminem, things like that. Beastie Boys, really, for me, really good for weightlifting. Whatever you listen to, in my mind, listen to music. Anything that gets you more encouraged to do it and passes the time, I'm all for. Now, remember a couple weeks ago, we talked about the trick with your phone at the gym, and that's what we all play our music on now, is that texting, social media, doing that while you're working out. If it's running, you don't run as fast, or walking, you don't walk as fast. If it's lifting weights, when you go back to the next set, you don't push as hard. Your strength output is worse. So you have to find a way to listen to music without actually being on your phone while you're working out. So what I've been doing since I did that study a few weeks ago is I put it in my gym bag sort of on the side of the room and play the music, and then just every 3 or 4 sets I go and enter the information about the weight and how many reps I did, because I do keep track of that, but I don't want to be texting and doing all that. So it's sort of a fine line with that, but find a way to listen to music at the gym. Just don't be on your phone while you're working out. All right, one of the first episodes of Better Than Ever Live that I did involved a discussion of death by hot dog. If you missed that, definitely go back and listen to it or watch it on YouTube. But I talked about a study that shows that for every hot dog you eat, you lose 36 minutes of your life. I think it's fascinating. All right, so let's talk about another food that may not be so good for you. First, Harvard, thought to be one of the sort of epicenters of health. Whether or not you agree with that, that's another story. But there was a Harvard study, 5 lifestyle habits that affect your risk of early death. Healthy diet. We've talked over and over about that. Being physically active, obviously important. Maintaining age-appropriate and height-appropriate weight. Basically keeping your body mass index between 18.5 and 24.9. If you do smoke, stop. If you don't smoke, don't start. And moderate alcohol. And you've heard me say before, not a huge fan of alcohol other than maybe in small quantities. I am not a huge believer that any amount of alcohol is healthy. The red wine stuff, I think the grapes may have some benefit. I think the whole thing about resveratrol, I'm a little skeptical of that, quite honestly, but I'm okay with alcohol. I drink it occasionally, but again, very, very small amounts and sporadically. I know the recommendations are a little different. That's just my personal opinion. Again, it's not medical advice. All right, there was a study out of northern Spain, looked at almost 300 elderly people aged 60 and older, and they found one type of food very good for you, one potentially really bad for you. First, the good news: the more fruits you eat in your diet, the lower your overall mortality score. My mom's going to be thrilled with this, because when my dad went keto, she wanted to go keto too, but she just couldn't give up fruit. She eats a ton of fruit. Well, good job, Mom. Now, my mom is ridiculously physically active. I've probably talked about that here before, but she loves fruit, and clearly that is good for her. Here is the bad one. Bad news for a whole lot of people, and it is potatoes. And it didn't say specifically, I'm sure this is hard to track it, but I assume it applies to all potatoes, whether that's French fries, baked potatoes, mashed potatoes, doesn't seem to matter. 32% higher risk of death. So you probably thought those French fries weren't good for you, and baked potato maybe not so good for you either. I don't eat much in the way of potatoes except on a rare cheat day. That doesn't bother me that much. But I bet the French fries would, I'm guessing, 20% of the American population eats French fries every day at some point during the day. And maybe that's high. I doubt it. But yeah, potatoes, maybe not so good for your long-term, for your longevity. You may die early. Now, the potato lobby out there, don't send me nasty stuff. I'm just reading a study. All right, and last, let's talk about nightmares. I think this is fascinating. I don't actually remember my dreams, or very, very rarely remember my dreams. I'd love to hear if you have occasional nightmares. What's the one that you get the most often? I would love to know. Well, there was a recent study, or a survey, I guess would be a better way to say it. It was by Amerisleep, and they polled 2,000 adults, and there were 5 specific nightmares that at least half of the respondents had had at some point in their life. The most common was falling, after that being chased, then death, feeling lost, and feeling trapped. Now, I've definitely had the falling many times. I can remember that. Probably have had being chased. I can't think that I've ever had a nightmare that I was dying, and I don't remember specifically feeling lost or feeling trapped. But to be fair, I don't remember my dreams much at all, and I don't really have any desire. I know there's brainwave programs you can play through headphones that help you remember dreams, and there's even medications. Not really something I care that much about, but I think it's interesting that basically 2/3 of Americans have had a nightmare where they're falling, and they have an explanation, both a sort of an emotional explanation, let's just say, and a scientific one. I'll get to that in a minute. Oh, actually, let's do it now. So they said that the emotional explanation for why people get falling nightmares is people go through periods where their life's out of control, that they're insecure about something or losing control of something, and that would explain a nightmare about falling. I'm not sure I believe that. The other one's a scientific one. This sort of makes sense. We've all probably experienced this sensation right as we're waking up from sleep. We sort of jerk. It's called the hypnic jerk. And I'm not going to explain sort of how that happens, but your brain's not necessarily functioning normally yet, but you get this quick jerk. Your brain doesn't realize that you're just laying in bed. Maybe it loses its sense of gravity. If you're still in a dreamlike state, your brain may feel that sort of quick jerk and then play the scene out as if you're falling. I don't know if that's true, but that's what these people say. Here's where I think these common nightmares are funny. They broke it down, men and women. Women out there, what do you think the most common female nightmare is? Well, turns out the most common female-specific nightmare is the death of a loved one, or a loved one passing. And that makes sense. A son or a daughter or a mom or a husband. Completely get it. The most common nightmare for men, I'm going to just read this verbatim. Anything including technology malfunction. I'm going to let that sink in for a minute. I'm just picturing some guy dreaming that his remote control isn't working. or his video game system isn't working. Now, these people tried to explain it off as, well, men, have the dangerous jobs, and if their technology malfunctions, it could be life or death. Maybe. I'm highly skeptical of that. All right. Really, I ran longer than I intended to today, and I've got to go, but really enjoyed you being here. Next week, just so you know, I sort of teased this on Tuesday. And a ton of people have kind of given me feedback about this, saying, hey, I'm driving home at 5 o'clock. I can't watch live. Could you do it at another time? I'm going to try out. I'm not saying I'm going to do this forever, but next week the shows will be at noon. Barring some catastrophic change with my work schedule, I think I've cleared it out, where we're going to do Better Than Ever Live next Tuesday and next Thursday at 12 p.m. Eastern Time, 9 a.m. Pacific Time. Remember, if you can't attend this live, YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, definitely subscribe to the podcast, Better Than Ever Live, wherever you get your podcasts. If you're listening to this on podcast, but you want to comment or you have questions and would like me to answer, I'd love to have you here live. YouTube.com/Dr. David Geier, Facebook.com/Dr. David Geier, and that is DrDavidGeier. If you get any kind of close, Facebook, YouTube will direct you to me. I have at least enough social media presence that usually works out. And then LinkedIn, I don't know the specific link on LinkedIn, but just search Dr. David Geier. You will find me. Very much look forward to seeing you there. And I'm also thinking about starting a Friday Ask Dr. Geier live show. Again, it may be 5, it may be noon, but where I answer questions about stuff we talk about here, health, wellness type things, aging, sleep, nutrition, exercise, or if you've got orthopedic questions, if you want to talk about peptides and all sorts of non-surgical treatments for some of these injuries, I would love to do that. So that may be coming. I don't know if that'll be every Friday or maybe once a month, something like that. So that's coming as well. Thank you so much for watching. Very excited to see you noon Eastern Time next Tuesday. Take care.